folks, it's that time. The first writing assignment of the semester. For this assignment, I've given you 4 different articles related to the decisions people make around paying for college. I'd like for you to pick 2 of those articles to use for this assignment. From those 2 articles, I'd like for you to identify 2 different identities that we've discussed, and talk about how the articles you've selected show how those identities impact the decisions around paying for college. You're also welcome to bring in other reputable sources as well. Journal or news articles, first-person blog accounts, things of that nature. If it's not a reputable source, a fringe news site or Wikipedia, for example, you shouldn't use it for this assignment. If you have questions about whether a source is reputable, feel free to email me and ask. The assignment should be 3 to 4 pages long. The format should use a 12-point Times New Roman font and be single-spaced with standard margins. You need to use MLA-style citations on both the Works Cited page and for the inline citations. Finally, be sure to check the rubric in the assignment folder. This is exactly what I'll be looking for when I grade your assignments. So, I'd like to talk a bit about writing academic papers. Most of us are used to informal writing. This is the sort of writing we do when we're sending emails or posting on social media. It's personal, you use a lot of slang and abbreviations, and overall it's pretty casual. For the most part, I'd say our discussion board posts have been fairly informal, which is appropriate for discussions. Formal academic writing, however, has a particular purpose. You have a point of view, and you're using what experts have said to support your point of view. For that reason, formal writing should be well structured and follow a logical flow. Your language should be precise. This is the time to use your big words, and make use of the thesaurus feature. You should also be impersonal. This writing isn't about you, it's about your point of view, and what information you have to convince your audience that your point of view is the correct one. You want to identify your audience, too. Generally, when you're writing an academic paper, your audience is your peers. That's how you gauge what is common knowledge versus what you have to explain. In this case, you want to write as though your classmates will be reading it, even though I'll be the only one reading it. So since we've defined concepts like identity, racism, and classism, you don't need to define those in your writing. However, if you're discussing a concept we haven't discussed, you should make sure your audience understands it. I want to be clear that formal writing isn't better than informal writing, but it is designed to help make sure that you're getting your point across. Learning how to write formally is a valuable skill. Most careers will require you to write at some point, and being able to express your thoughts clearly and logically will help you along the way. So, what is a formal writing structure? Let's start with just a paragraph. The first sentence of a paragraph should express the idea you're going to discuss, the first part of the body. The first few sentences are the fillings, the information about your main idea that supports your main idea. Then you want to wrap it up by restating your main idea. So for example, say my main idea was that vegetarianism is better for the environment. So my first sentence might be, there's a considerable amount of data that shows that vegetarianism impacts the environment less than a carnivorous diet. My next few sentences would be information I'd found that supported my idea, like animals produce more greenhouse gases than are used in growing plants, and how much more land must be cleared to support livestock versus cleared for farms. Then I'd wrap up my paragraph by restating my main idea, something like, when we look at the environmental impact of raising animals for meat, it becomes clear that a vegetarian diet is better for the environment. The overall structure of a paper is pretty much the same. You have your main idea, paragraphs that support your idea, and a conclusion that reiterates your idea. Your introductory paragraph should be a general background about your main idea, ending with a statement that summarizes your main idea. That statement is what's known as your hypothesis, the idea you're going to try and prove in your paper. Going back to our example topic about vegetarianism, my introductory paragraph would probably start out discussing why we should pay attention to the environmental impact of diets, and end in a statement like, a vegetarian diet would help alleviate these problems by reducing the overall greenhouse gases from food production, we reduce the amount of land cleared to support food production, and we reduce overall clean water usage. Then, you want to support that overall main idea with at least one paragraph for each idea that you talked about in your hypothesis. In our example, I would have a paragraph that had my evidence for how greenhouse gases would be reduced, another paragraph on how much cleared land affects the environment, and a third on how much clean water livestock consume versus water used for growing. Finally, you want to summarize all this information in your concluding paragraph, beginning with the main idea and then providing insights gained from the main body of your paper. In our example, I might start by saying, as you can see, a vegetarian diet significantly improves the environmental impact of food production. I'd then have a summary sentence about what we know about greenhouse gases, another one about cleared land, and a third about clean water, and then conclude that last paragraph with a general statement about the importance of reducing our environmental impact. Lastly, let's talk about citations. Citations are how you give credit for someone else's work. It's also important for academic honesty, because citations let the reader go back and check if your information is correct. So when do you use citations? Basically, anytime you're using an idea that isn't your own. This might be a direct quote, or just a restating or summary of what someone else has written, or data someone else is collecting. If you aren't sure, use a citation. If you don't give credit for the work other people have done, then the reader assumes that it's your own personal work or idea. And taking credit for someone else's work is called plagiarism. Plagiarism is not only morally wrong, it's against the academic code, and can result in you getting a 0 for an assignment or failing a course. Serious enough plagiarism could result in expulsion. So, be safe. Use citations anytime you think you might be using someone else's thoughts. The big exception to this is what is called common knowledge. Knowing what is common knowledge is a little tricky because you have to guess a bit. For our purposes, anything you think you could ask your classmates about and they'd know without having to look up the answer could be considered common knowledge. If I've defined it or explained it in my lectures, that would be considered common knowledge for this class, but not necessarily for another class. Again, if you aren't sure, find a source and use a citation. A bit about inline citations. These are brief references to whatever quote, idea, or data you're using. Every citation should have a corresponding full entry in your Works Cited page. So if I want to see where your information came from, I can find it easily in your Works Cited page and then find the original work. Generally, for MLA citations, you want to put the author's name or authors' names along with the year it was published in parentheses. However, if you've mentioned the author as part of your discussion, you only need to put the year in parentheses. I know this can all be a little overwhelming, and I promise it gets easier with practice. If you aren't certain of how to create an entry for your Works Cited page, or how exactly to cite something in line, I highly recommend using Purdue's Online Writing Lab. It's full of information on how to reference things like websites and blogs, as well as the usual sources like books and articles. Brockport also has some resources that can be helpful. The writing tutoring can look over your paper and help you figure out what needs to be reworked, and they can do it remotely. The Drake Library's librarians are also available to help with writing and citations, and you can text them directly. And of course, I'm always available to answer questions about all your assignments. Good luck with this assignment, and I look forward to reading it.